On Monday, with 2 minutes on the clock, Jeremy Corbyn, MP for Islington North, became the fourth candidate to enter the race for the leadership of the Labour Party. With more than 3 decades' experience in Parliament, what would a Corbyn leadership or even Prime Ministership look like? Unlike his rivals, Andy Burnham, Yvette Cooper and Liz Kendall, he is untainted by all the policies that have arguably made Labour unpopular, from the Iraq War to NHS privatisation to the EU to flimsy bank regulation. He joins me now. Jeremy, welcome to Going Underground. Let's start on toxicity, because some of the other candidates may have toxic legacies. Some people credit you with not having them. Why is it that you wanted tighter regulation on the banks before the banking crisis, unlike certainly Gordon Brown, your then leader, let alone Tony Blair? What did you know that none of these candidates maybe, or none of the people in your party, let alone David Cameron, did?
Intuitively, if you let big banks operate in an unregulated environment, they will get themselves into problems, they will run out of cash, they will then demand the state bail them out. I think there has to be very tight regulation. Of course, the combination of investment and retail banking being under one arm meant that the banks were actually very vulnerable for dodgy investments, hence the ripple effect of the subprime mortgage market in the USA went global and caused enormous problems. Now, I don't blame the Labour government of Blair and Brown entirely for that, because it wasn't their fault that these banks were so involved in frankly dodgy American investments. But what I do think they should have been much more aware of was the need for much greater regulation to prevent those kind of ripple effects. Public ownership of the banking system, or at least public participation in it, is a good thing. Give
Unlike your rivals, though, who didn't see what you saw and got substantially more votes in the leadership election so far by the Parliamentary Labour Party.
Well, the Parliamentary Labour Party is one part of the Labour Party and one part of the Labour movement, and they declared quite early on in the election. Those of us on the left of the party had quite long discussions, as people of the left often do, and we came to a conclusion only, less than 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, tomorrow, that we would run a candidate, and I was asked to put my name forward, and here I am.
OK, what did you know about NHS privatisation policy undertaken by the Labour Party and, of course, continued to an extent by the coalition, that they didn't, the other rival candidates didn't?
I used to be a union organiser in the National Health Service. Before that, I was a member of a health authority, and I was a local councillor in Haringey, and therefore have some experience on the ground of what happens when you contract out services, when you privatise them. You get a two-tier workforce, you get somebody trying to make a profit out of the National Health Service rather than the rest of the departments who are trying to run a service in the National Health Service. There are two competing ethos there, there's two competing principles there, and once you bring a private sector in to run part of the NHS, you're damaging the NHS. And then what the Blair government did, which I absolutely opposed, was a private finance initiative. Yeah, private finance sounds great.
Undertaken by your chief rival, Andy Burnham, arguably.
Well, partly, but others were worse. Anna Milburn was particularly much worse. But once you bring in private finance initiative into the NHS, it sounds great. You've got all this money coming in, you get a new building, you get new this, you get new that, and suddenly you find you don't own the hospital, you don't own the building, you don't own the contract, you don't own the workforce, you've got no control, and you're paying, and you're paying, and you're paying. This is what's happened in Addenbrooke's in Cambridge, where the hospital finally collapsed under the weight of PFI.
Your rivals all supported the Iraq War. Quite a few of them opposed an investigation into the reason we went into Iraq. You opposed Britain's alliance with Saddam, then opposed the sanctions against Saddam, and then your party's support for the war in Iraq. Again, what did you know that none of your rivals, none of your party, none of the House of Commons and the people at large didn't?
I have a very mixed constituency with people from all over the world. Refugees from all over the world have made their home in my area, made a fantastic contribution to the community. I was never a supporter of Saddam Hussein or the human rights abuses that happened in Iraq, and in the 1980s I was opposing arms sales to Iraq. Likewise, I was trying to draw attention to the use of chemical weapons against the Kurdish people. I was a lone voice. There was just a handful of us that were prepared to raise those things. And then when the whole thing turned around and suddenly we decided to go to war with Iraq in 2002, because that's really when the decision was made, I was there at the very beginning. I was a founder of Stop the War movement, Stop the War Coalition, still chair of Stop the War Coalition, and I think the war was a disaster.
Do you think it endangers national security? Because certainly the media will be big on your campaign for number 10 if you win the leadership of the Labour Party about national security.
What is security? Is security the ability to bomb, maim, kill, destroy? Or is security the ability to get on with other people and have some kind of respectful existence with them? Now, I think that the war in Iraq, destroyed all government and public service structures in Iraq. That was the de-Baathification program of Paul Wolfowitz and others, which ended up then with a lot of guns going off to form into either criminal gangs or different forms of militia, and then gradually the whole thing has morphed into ISIS fighting other forces in Iraq. And could all this have been avoided? You can never say never, you don't know for sure, but certainly, even after the invasion, if they'd kept the state structures of Iraq, the army and the police force together, then I think you'd have a far more stable society than you have now.
I understand from one hustings in Dublin, I think a GMB hustings, that apart from Andy Burnham, all the other contenders support a benefits cap. Do you understand the economy as a grocery shop, that the banks need to be, the books need to be balanced? Or because a lot of people will be saying, you don't understand that we have to pay our way in the world, and that's why we need austerity.
You've got a lovely poster up here of what Labour was doing in the 1940s. Labour inherited then a debt-to-income ratio of 250%, but invested in National Health Service, invested in infrastructure, invested in housing, invested in people, created full employment, a welfare state, and healthcare as a right. If we invest in people rather than a book balancing exercise, over a longer period, you get far better out of it. I am appalled at the inequality in Britain, the levels of poverty in Britain, the levels of homelessness in Britain, the levels of overcrowding in Britain. Invest in people. That creates jobs, that creates greater prosperity.
Already some of your mainstream media interviews, you may have terrified people on average income, because a couple on 2 average wages, you seem to be suggesting that the tax threshold would hit them. You'd raise taxes on them. Do you think because you spent your life with activists and the underclass, let alone the striving middle classes, you don't understand how rich the rich are, and that you could put taxes up on people earning more than £250,000 a year?
Well, I think you can put tax up on those, but
and leave the rest alone.
But indeed, but I'm more interested in corporate taxation and corporate tax loopholes around Europe, around Britain, on the Channel Islands, Isle of Man, and the tax havens in various American and British territories around the world. We've got to look very hard at that. There are big companies paying ducks and drakes with national economy. Boots move their corporate headquarters to Switzerland, switch their profits to Switzerland, pay 5% corporation tax instead of British corporation tax rates. There's nothing right about that. They're making their money here.
TTIP, of course, might have an influence on that. What's your view of the Europe debate, which apparently where we learn that it's tearing the Tory party apart? Would you give a free vote to Labour?
Yeah.
Labour people on Europe?
A free vote is...
It'll be over by then, by the time.
It will be over by then, but a free vote is important, but also Labour making demands on Europe. Demands over TTIP, demands over working time directives, demands over the social chapter, demands over the way the European Central Bank operates. Look at the way they're treating Greece. I realise we're not in the Eurozone, but we still have some influence over that.
Because you appeared to demonise UKIP immediately, and they became quite a force, certainly electorally, and maybe your rivals will be looking to regaining them.
Well, people vote UKIP out of desperation, but voting UKIP, does it build houses, does it build hospitals, does it create jobs, does it give wages? No, it doesn't. Just what they're trying to do is say there are two problems in the world. One is Europe and the other is immigration. They've forgotten that actually trade with Europe is quite important. They've also forgotten that people that have migrated and made their homes in Britain work very hard, pay taxes and run our health service, railways and everything else. We're a better society for the hard work of all those people. The
last leader to oppose US foreign policy in a big way was Harold Wilson against the Vietnam War. We know about the smear tactics against him. Are you ready, as the leader of a Labour Party, to oppose US policy and not be smeared or cope with the tactics against you, let alone from the press?
Look, if you believe in peace, believe in human rights, believe in justice, and you believe in a foreign policy that sets those at the heart of it rather than the ability to militarily dominate the world, there are people that won't agree with that and won't like that, but I'm sure they will understand the need for peace and justice.
Jeremy Corbyn, thank you.
Thank you.